Well, hello and welcome back, my friend. Man, there are times when we're going to hit those challenges, and those challenges can just seem overwhelming. Like there's no other hope. There's not a way out. And today I'm talking with Scott Maderer, and Scott has been in that place. I've been in that place. And first off, we'd like to encourage you. There is a way out. But in Scott's story that we're going to get into today, you're going to see where finances, man, they can just be that one thing that becomes like the chains that keep you in that prison where it locks you up and you don't see a way out. There is a way out, but oftentimes we've got to persevere and stick with it and look for, just other ways of looking at our situation. Dude, we're going to get into some powerful stuff here with Scott. I'm super excited about it. So Scott has his own podcast. He's up to 1,600 episodes. And so the man has definitely a lot of knowledge to provide. And his podcast has inspired stewardship. And so it's talking about our time, our talents, our treasures. What are we doing with our life? And you're going to see that, you know what? Just because of where you're at now doesn't mean you're stuck there. Scott's, taken the time, stopped, reinvented himself 4 times, not just once, but 4 times. That means you don't have to get it right on the first time. There's grace, but it takes giving ourselves grace. And so we're going to jump in here. Scott's got a lot to just give us as far as insights and wisdom. So we're not going to take any more time. Scott, how are you doing today, my friend?
I am doing great. I'm trying to stay warm. So even though I'm in Texas, we managed to get snow, which is really unusual for us here. So we're not prepared for it.
There are quite a few places that are not prepared when that snow gets that far south. And it's like, could I drive on the freeway? Yes. Should I drive on the freeway? No. It's not just about us. It's also about those that are driving around us.
Yeah, just to keep in mind, somebody told me the other day, I'm not even sure that this is 100% true, but I'm going to treat it like it's true because it could be. My son lives up in Dallas, Fort Worth, and somebody said that Dallas, the Metroplex, largest city in all of Texas, owns 6 snowplows. And I'm like, yeah, that tracks. That sounds about right. We don't need them. So.
Yeah, you don't need them until you need them. That's the problem.
But what happens is it snows. We all just stay home. We're just like, no, we're not. No, we're just nope.
Yeah, it's when those storms hit that it's like a whole new awareness about do I really need to go out comes about. So
I don't need milk that bad.
Exactly. It's probably honestly not on the shelf anymore, Scott. It's probably been raided already, and the milk, the bread, and toilet paper. You go to
the store and milk, bread, and toilet paper are always gone. It's like, really? Why these 3 items?
Yeah, exactly. Well, dude, Scott, let's jump in. And what does life look like on the professional side of things for you today?
Well, today I find myself as a what I call a stewardship coach. So just like the podcast is about stewardship, time, talent, and treasures, that's what I call myself as the coaching that I do. So a lot of times, the trick is that a lot of times people feel like, man, there's stuff I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to be living this out. I'm supposed to be, starting this side thing or working more in this area. And it could be in the thing that they're already doing. It could be something else, but they feel I'm just not able to live into it quite as much as I should. And a lot of times they feel like what's holding them back is either time or money. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough money. Truth is, I trick people. They come to me for help with time or money, and then all we work on is talent. Because at the end of the day, the way you handle your time and the way you handle your money is actually about how you handle yourself. It's not really about time or money. Those are the symptom. They're not actually the problem. And so we end up working mainly on talent, but the areas that people come for help is usually time or money.
Yeah, the bigger pain points that are screaming in your face going, hey, I don't have enough. Usually the ones that move the needle, but really aren't the fuel, so to speak. Like, you're showing people, hey, the ears behind the curtain. This is what you actually need to invest in.
Yeah, the symptom is very seldom actually the solution. That goes for a lot of things. You're having problems in your relationship. usually that's a symptom. There's something else going on, that's deeper. And same thing happens with our time and our money. When you're not living into your priorities, you're going to feel conflicted. When you're not living into your priorities with your time, when you're not living into your priorities with your money, you're going to feel conflicted. You're going to feel strain. You're going to feel stress. And a lot of times the things we think that solve those problems end up actually making those problems worse.
Hmm. Yeah, I think back the way I was tricked into, realizing, hey, I have problems. I am the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Was actually I was doing coaching through somebody for business, right? I took that big leap and I said, I need help in the area of business. Truth was, I needed help, period. And as we were going through coaching over the weeks and the months, and I'm sitting there going, hey, I've got this. And then it became talking about, home life and everything. It was like, oh my gosh, it's me. And I'm showing up at home and at work as the same person.
And the same person.
And so the pain points, the issues were consistent, only they were amplified at home because I didn't have, clients or, people that I was looking to engage with that wouldn't put up with what I was doing at home. So it wasn't as loud
your
on
wife
the volume
and your kids
scale.
will call you on your
Yeah, they put up with a lot that they should not have, but it was one that it came to bear and came to light when the timing was right, and then things began to be addressed and changed. But it's funny how, like you talked about, what's actually got our attention isn't necessarily, what should have our attention, and is the root.
Well, the truth is all coaching is life coaching at the end of the day. It's just a matter of what lens of your life you're coming at it from, so when I do financial coaching, the lens that we're having the conversation is around finances. When I work with business owners, well, it may be around business. When I'm working with, it's the lens that we're looking at it or the frame that we're looking at it. But at the end of the day, let's face it, it's all about really your life, and so it's all life coaching, really. It's just what lens are we looking at it through?
Yeah, that's so accurate. Well, let's jump over to the personal side. What does life look like for you today in the area of personal?
So today, we're actually really blessed. So we lived for about 25 years out in kind of the middle of nowhere, South Texas, where we drove an hour to go to the grocery store. I used to explain to people, I live 45 minutes from Walmart, Starbucks, or McDonald's, just because people can grasp, wow, that is out in the country. We recently moved. We actually moved late 2024 to a house in the Bryan, Texas area. So came up here to get a little closer to my mom and my family and help out some with her and her situation and that kind of thing. So luckily some folks that we used to live with my mother-in-law, and some folks moved back down there that could help take care of her and support her. And so we were able to move up here. So, everything kind of worked out where we were able to. So my wife and I live up here in a nice house in Bryan we bought a house and got chickens with it. They weren't able to take the chickens. So they're like, would you keep the chickens? We're like, all right, we'll do that. Whatever. It was really a blessing situation. Just a lot of things tumbled into place the right way. So we've been up here just for about 4 months now. So not that long yet, but we're loving it. We're now went from an hour from everything to 15 minutes from everything. There's 4 grocery stores within 15 minutes. So, it's like that. I have an adult son. He lives up in the Dallas area. He's been working. He's about to turn 22, has a full-time job. Keeps getting promoted. So, he's doing something right. So we're glad about that. For some reason, he wanted to move near Dallas. I don't know. His girlfriend moved up there, and for some reason he wanted to live up there instead of close to mom and dad. I don't really get it. I'm kidding. I get it. So, he's up there working and starting his life up there. I have a adopted daughter and her 2 girls that are my goddaughters that live kind of close to back where we used to live, but we are still very in their life. So it's just blessed in a lot of different ways. We're finding a church up here, finding new contacts up here, kind of rebuilding. We're in that rebuilding phase. As I told someone the other day, they're like, "Where do you like to go to eat?" I'm like, "We're still in the we're going to go anywhere and try anything phase." It's like we haven't found the list yet. So it's that kind of situation.
Yeah, and now with the move, congratulations, by the way, on the new place. You've probably got a lot more places to pick from than what you did, just 4 months ago.
Absolutely. Yeah. There were 3 restaurants where we used to live. Now there's, 300 restaurants because this is a college town. So there's a lot of food.
Yeah, then it's definitely changed and morphed on that scale for you. Well, Scott, let's kind of jump back. I alluded to this when we were talking at the beginning. There was one point where the finances, now where it's plentiful and it's a very different situation. That wasn't at all the case, man. The finances had gotten tight, and that caused other things to, then come about. Can you take us back to that time, how things kind of led up, and what was really on your mind, and what you were looking at?
Sure. I can share some of that. So, back, I'm going to go back even a little further. So, I had grown up, doing different things, graduated from college, and I was a school teacher. I actually married my high school sweetheart, and we were together for a while, and then we'd actually gotten divorced. I met my current wife. She was going through a divorce. I've gone through a divorce. We both got divorced, and then we kind of started hanging out, and it's like, well, maybe we should try this again, but with each other instead of with the first. We both made a mistake the first time. Let's see if works the second time. And so we'd gotten together and started, kind of rebuilding our life. We'd moved to that place in the middle of nowhere. We'd lived in a couple of different places and then eventually moved out to that place in the middle of nowhere with family. We were doing all of that. I was still school teaching. And at that, I know this is a shock, but school teachers aren't paid real well. I know it's shocking. You would think that they were probably paid like doctors, but they're not. So I was doing a lot of long hours, a lot of hard work, really very little money, building up and, doing that work. And my wife and I were working on the house that we were living in and, fixing that up, buying furniture, buying other things, basically just doing normal American stuff, living a little beyond our means, but doing it pretty consistently. And debt started piling up. I've always had clinical depression. I actually, as a teenager, had attempted suicide a few times. This is something that has not a new thing, but I'd kind of gotten some treatment and I'd moved past that when I went through the divorce and had been doing better. And a lot of those feelings and those depressions began to come back to me. As with the debt went up, I took more and more of that weight onto my shoulders of, it's my job. I'm the guy, I'm the provider. I'm the breadwinner. I'm supposed to be taking care of my wife and eventually my baby son, but I'm not doing a good job. And so a lot of men take on a lot of their identity around their career and their ability to provide. Again, rightly, wrongly, good or bad, a lot of us do that. And so I kind of felt like a failure. I began to internalize that idea that I'm not a good provider. And as that got heavier and heavier, I took on more and more of it. I was going to protect my wife. I wasn't going to tell her about it. She knew, but I'm going to, my wife's a smart lady, but I'm going to protect her, and not tell her about all of this and not share and not do all of that. I also, at that time, I had been raised in the church and had been very into Christianity and the church. And I had actually left the church back in college because, well, quite frankly, I loved God, but I didn't like a lot of the people that I met in church. And so I felt a lot of hypocrisy and a lot of falsehoods and a lot of this sort of thing. And so I had left it. And I actually called myself an atheist and an agnostic. And that's tied in because kind of all of this coincidentally began to come together as I was driving home at night on a very windy road that had large drop-offs on the side. And I began to think to myself, if I just drive off the side of the road in the middle of the night, everyone will think I fell asleep. Insurance will pay out. My wife will be able to pay off the debt. She'll be okay. At this time we had a baby son at home. She'll be able to take care of him. She'll be able to take care of herself. And I'm thinking this night after night after night. I hadn't done it, but I'm thinking about it and beginning to plan it out and beginning to figure out how I could do it. And where's the best drop off and these sorts of things. And I used to listen to talk radio on the way home, not because I actually cared what was on talk radio. I wasn't even really listening to listen. It was just so there was a human voice talking to keep me awake. And they switched the lineup and they put on this Dave Ramsey show. And all of a sudden on a Friday night, I'm driving home and I'm hearing all these people. It was a rebroadcast of the show, but later in the day, talking about being debt free. And I'm arguing with the radio, this is stupid, and I'm hearing people whose situation was better than ours. And I'm hearing people whose situation was worse than ours. But I'm hearing all of these people talk about changing what they were doing and getting debt free. And, I was mad, quite frankly, and I'm yelling at the radio that, how stupid this is. But Monday, I'm driving home again. And again, they're playing the same, the show, but it's now not a Friday episode. And they're starting to talk about how. And I'll be honest, even to this day, I don't agree with everything Dave Ramsey says or everything he puts out there. But at the same time, I was beginning to hear these little nuggets showing up over and over again that really what it boiled down to is these people had decided we're going to do something different. It was less about, quote, these are the steps, and more about we've made a conscious decision to live in a way that is different than the way we've been living. And because of that, we got out of it. And I basically said, well, maybe, before, instead of killing myself, because this was the first couple of nights that I hadn't thought about it because I was so busy yelling at the radio, that, maybe there's something to this. So I went the next weekend and I went and found my wife and I said, hey, here's our situation. Here's what's been going on. I've been listening to this radio show on the way home. She says, you mean Dave Ramsey? And I'm like, well, yeah. And she's like, yeah, I listen to it during the day with Dad. I'm like, okay. And she's like, and yeah, I know that's how much debt we're in. And I know what's been going on. And, again, she knew all of this, smart woman, but I wasn't sharing it with her because I was going to protect her. And I basically told her how I'd been feeling, told her that I'd been suicidal, and said, do you want to leave me, or do you want to change what we're doing and do something completely different? And she said, no, I don't want to leave you. Let's do it. We can make this work. And so we began making different decisions, began changing things. And over 2 years and 11 months, I am not allowed to round that up to 3 years. My wife will come through that door and beat me. So it's 2 years, 11 months. We paid off $78,856.46, or that might have been $854.68. But anyway, brain cramp, not sure, but over $78,000 we paid off in those 2 years, 11 months. And at that time, I was making an average income of about $55K. So you can kind of do the back of envelope math and realize we were living on nothing, and again, that's not the way everyone should do it. That's the way we chose to do it. In that same time, I also kind of began to open myself back up to the idea of returning to church and returning to my relationship with God and those sorts of things, and began to do that as well. So it not only changed the way I was walking in my relationship with my wife, it changed how we were walking with our finances and the decision we were making there. It changed, in my case, the walk that I had in my spiritual life. That's one of the things you find a lot of times when you work on one area, it makes changes, it ripples out. When you decide to get healthy, that ripples out into other areas. When you decide to get your money in order, that ripples out into other areas. When you decide to get, whatever it is. And so that kind of was the beginning of that change. Now, again, it took a lot of time. It took a lot of work. We made a lot of mistakes. I changed careers in the middle of that, went into the corporate world, did that for 11 years. And then left a very high paying, very high end corporate job to go start my own coaching business, which everyone told me I was completely crazy to do. But did that. And, that's where we are now and what we've been doing. I started part-time in 2011 and full-time in 2017. So that's what we've been doing for that long.
That is a lot, Scott. Wow.
That's the short version. Would you like the long version? No.
I can appreciate the highlights here. And when you were sharing about trying to, protect your wife, dude, mm-hmm. It is scary how many times that is like a super common. More times than not, you're going to see that with the guys where it's like, yep, mm-hmm. I'm protecting my wife by not telling her what's going on. Dude, I did it in my infinite wisdom, Scott. It was like, shh, I'm going to protect my wife. If I don't tell her, she doesn't know.
Right.
Nope. Sorry. My wife, just like yours, knew everything that was going on. May not have known all the details, but it's not like, I was masquerading and
No.
keeping secrets from her. She knew exactly what was going on. It's like, it would have been so much easier just being open and honest. And I wouldn't have had to worry about the whole thing of, keeping the secret. Like there's like stress involved in that in and
And
of itself.
energy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All of a sudden you've got somebody who's on your side, who's working with you, who's pulling the cart beside you, instead of you're now working, imagine it's like two horses hooked up to a wagon, right? And one of them is hooked up and pulling on the wagon, and the other one doesn't even know there's a wagon. Well, it's you're not making as much progress. And please, I'm not comparing our wives to horses or us, but you get the idea, the
Understood,
analogy.
man.
And yet at the same time, it's when we work together, when we get on the same page, when we align things, we got better communication. All of a sudden, it's like, yeah, this is what we're after. We can do this. We can make this work. And even though the problem is exactly the same, you've got a built-in accountability partner. You've got a built-in another brain that is smart and wise and able to see things that you can't see. We're kind of stupid, enlisting them for help and communicating with them. But, I'll speak for myself. I don't know about any other guys, but, occasionally as a guy, I'm kind of stupid. So there you go.
I think that's like universal. So it's one of those of like, hey, why would I not take the help? But in the moment, it's the same kind of thing when I look back, Scott. It's like with our finances, when we hit those kind of situations where it's like, I'm at a point of desperation. I don't know what to do other than this extreme action because there's no more rope to, to go down. If I would have looked, talked with my wife, it's like she's up at the top of the cliff with a longer rope, a stronger rope. But if I just talk to her and share what's going on, hey, there's another way. It's almost like I'm hampering myself because I'm not taking that action. But in that moment, Scott, I never saw it in that perspective.
Right.
It was like I'm protecting my fragile wife. Mm-hmm. My wife is anything but fragile. And she wears combat boots.
We're wired in a way sometimes to be that protector, that provider, that person that is taking care of the situation. And whether it's genetic wiring or whether, I actually have a degree in genetics, and, the question of, is it nature or nurture? Is it your wiring or is it how you were brought up? And, truth is, geneticists don't ask that question. We've answered that question a long time ago. The answer is yes. It's both. It's really just a matter of how much of each is it. It's not a matter of, is it one or the other? And so this goes with that wiring too. In part, it's our culture and the way we're raised and what we're taught and the messages we hear. And then there's also some genetic and biology kind of components to it. It's some of both. But what it boils down to is, at the end of the day, those work together to create a situation where we don't want to communicate. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to own the emotions. We want to focus on the practical stuff and the steps and the process and all of that. We want to be good providers. We want to take care of everything. And what ends up happening, by the way, the number one cause of male suicide, financial problems and financial stress. Why? Because we own it and we put our identity into what we're doing around the area of money. Truth is, how much you make has nothing to do with your calling, has nothing to do with how you're a provider, has nothing to do with your identity, who you are as a man, but yet we feel that way. And so because of that, it creates those stress environments that often will lead men down a road of, I'm just going to clam up. I'm going to protect everybody. I'm going to own all of this myself, which can, in extreme situations, lead to suicide and other decisions that are very permanent solutions to what truly could be temporary problems.
Yeah. And more times than not, it is temporary. And yet we only look at it as this final overwhelming situation. Well, let's jump off into one thing that you just mentioned a moment ago in calling. So what is calling, and is it the same as purpose? And how do you get to it? Like, how do you discover, like, hey, this is my calling? Can you kind of walk us through that?
So calling is always, it's one of those things that's kind of a hard subject to talk. So we actually use two different words, that are in our culture, we treat these as interchangeable, meaning the same thing. And yet the reality is they don't. So one is career and the other is vocation. So literally those two words mean something different. So a career actually comes from a Latin word that means cart. It means a mode of transportation to get you from point A to point B. Okay. We've now come to use that for the thing we do, a job that provides money, to get us from point A to point B. If you think about your career, right? It's what you do. It's a role. It could be a business owner, could be an employee, you're an HVAC guy, you work in construction, but it's the role that we have that generates income. Okay. The word for calling, the word vocation, literally the same root as vocal, to speak, to be called, to have a message come to us. Okay. So calling, it implies something different than our career. It's something that comes from outside. I believe it comes from God, a creator, an outside being that's greater than me. I don't care what name you want to give it. And I don't even care if you believe that there is such a thing. It comes from outside of us. It is related to our purpose. It may not be exactly the same as our purpose or our passion, but there's overlap there. It's things that oftentimes the stuff that comes to us, that whenever we do it, we feel like we're living into something authentically. It's giving us energy. It could even be really hard. It could even be something that you got to work really hard at, but it doesn't matter. When you do it, you feel like, man, this is it. I'm jazzed. I'm ready to go. And oftentimes we confuse those and we think, oh, to live my calling, I have to have my career align 100% with the thing that gives me passion. Truth is, maybe, also maybe not. Career and calling are two different things. They don't have to overlap. They can, but they don't have to. By the same token, calling is one of those things that we don't usually arrive at in completion. In other words, we don't get there in one step. Instead, to quote the great philosopher Shrek, it's like an onion, right? You got to pull back the layers. You got to keep peeling back and finding out what are the things that give me energy. And so as an example, I was a school teacher. I worked in the corporate world. Now I'm a coach. But my mom will tell you that even when I was 8 years old, I was always the guy that other people came to for advice. I was always the guy that other people came to for help. I was always the guy that, in high school, I was always the guy that was friends with all the girls and gave them great advice, but was never asked for a date, because I was the friend, right? You're friend zoned, but it's because I was that person. They knew they could come to me and they could have somebody listen and not necessarily tell them what to do, but empathize and ask questions and do those sorts of. That's coaching. When I was a school teacher, I hated being the teacher that stood in the front of the room and lectured the whole time. Not that I didn't ever do that. There were times that was the appropriate way to convey information, but there were a lot more times that I was looking for activities that we could do in labs and asking questions and challenging the kids to come up with stuff. That's coaching, only it isn't, because it was in the framework of being a teacher. So were there things in teaching that I hated? Absolutely. Are there things today as a coach that I don't like doing? Absolutely. Because, guess what? I've yet to hear somebody get up in the morning and go, hey, I get to do laundry today. Woo! I'm sure there's somebody out there that's what jazzes them, but a lot of us, that's just something you have to do because you're alive and you're living. Same thing happens with our calling. There's parts that are associated with it that you may have to do that are uncomfortable or difficult or not fun, so that you can spend as much time as you can doing those things that at the end of the day, it's like, wow, this gives me energy. This feeds my soul. This makes me feel more complete. And so guess what? Moved into the corporate world. I was eventually promoted to a role where I was developing other leaders in the company. Well, guess how I did that? I did it through coaching. I did it through asking questions. I did it through challenging the way people think. I did it through creating frameworks and systems and processes. all the same stuff I do now. So even though my assignment has changed multiple times, my role, the career that I have, if you look at back, there's this thread that kind of runs between it that is related to how I'm made, how I'm called, how I'm created to do something. And, I'm good at it. It gives me energy. It gives me joy. It's something that is more deep than just I'm a coach. By the way, I don't know. I may be changing again at some point and doing something different, but the thread will still be there. It just may be playing out in a different way.
With what you've described, I'm like, you have continued to like almost morph through as the opportunities arise, as your perspective changes. I would look at it and I would have told you, Scott, I am who I am. I can't change. And if I thought I could change, it was like, you're limited to one. Mm-hmm. How is it that you can continue on that growth cycle, looking for, here's my calling, here's who I am, like you continue to grow and transform along the way. How are you continuing to give yourself the space and the opportunity more than just once, and not kind of dead end yourself, if that makes sense?
Yeah. It's funny because first off, if you don't like change, welcome to the human race. None of us do, right? We get comfortable in the place that we're at, the things that we're doing. By the way, we can get comfortable even with stuff that's really bad, right? It's why people end up in, abusive relationships sometimes for way longer than they should, because even though it's bad, I don't know what's on the other side, so I don't know if it's better or worse. I don't even know. I can't see it yet. And so I did it the same way that, now I sometimes help other people do it. I got help. I enrolled, I got coaches, I got people around me, my wife and others who were supportive of it, who began to say, hey, you could look at this a different way. You could do something a little different. Have you tried this? I found ways to test it and try it on the side. I think a lot of times, and sometimes we're forced to do this, but a lot of times, even when we're not forced to, part of our reticence is, I'm going to have to quit everything. I'm going to have to totally change everything. I'm going to have to give up everything I'm doing. There's no way I can do it. Yeah, but there's probably a way you can test it in a small scale or do it on the side, find a way to do part of it and see if it really does feel more authentic, if it really does fit better. If you really are able to, I remember the first time somebody paid me for coaching and it was like, well, this is cool. It's like I would have done this for free and they gave me a check, it's like, cool. It's all of those things. And you start to get that reinforcement to come through that, maybe this change thing isn't so overwhelming. It is something that I can do. So it's not about, jumping off a cliff and building your wings on the way down. Sometimes it's instead about, designing the plane, getting all the equipment together, even maybe building a test flight or two and then going, okay, now I'll jump. It's things that you can do. And again, some people are wired where like, man, they can jump off the cliff, build their wings, doesn't matter. But most of us aren't wired like that. Most of us are more, we would rather avoid pain than have pleasure. Most of us would rather it not hurt, than we would it feel good, so to speak. If there's a lot of studies that show our cognitive biases, we measure losses heavier than we measure gains. So somebody takes something away from you, that hurts worse than the good of somebody giving you the same thing. We have all of these sort of built-in biases that hold us back from change. And by the way, they're good things. They're survival characteristics. They help keep us alive. Because you can imagine, back in the day, if we were walking around and it's like, hey, I'll just eat whatever I see. Let me grab that. And you were real, guess what? Some of those people got poisoned and died, And so some of that reticence and some of that fear response is to protect us from the unknown. It's protect us from things that aren't good for us. The problem with it is we often then take that same wiring that's a good thing and let it keep us from things that are good for us, that are able to do it. So, how do you do it? You bring in support staff, you bring in a team, you bring in other people, a coach, a mentor, a mastermind group. I've done all of these things, at one time or another. Virtual mentors. You and I were talking about Dan Miller. He's one of my virtual mentors. He's somebody that I learned a ton from before I ever met him. Because I read his books and I listened to his podcasts and I found other ways to engage with him. And he said things and, he must be talking to me, because it really resonated. So you find those things that help you reframe that fear into, I can do something different. One of the things that somebody told me this one time back in the day when I was getting ready to do public speaking, and I've never really had that fear of public speaking that so many people do, but they said, neurobiologically, in terms of the chemistry of your brain, what's released into your brain, the chemicals, fear and excitement is the same chemical cascade. So when you feel yourself being afraid, relabel it as excitement. I'm not afraid to get up there and speak. I'm excited by it. It's the same chemistry. Your brain will go, oh, okay, you must be excited. It's like you can almost convince yourself to be excited instead of afraid and do those things anyway. And again, do them in a way that's not fatal. I'm all in at the poker table works in a James Bond movie. It doesn't work so well in real life, so that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about being foolish. I'm talking about being wise, but finding ways to do it in a way that breaks down. Because here's the thing. Once you start doing it and you see that it works, then it's like, maybe I can do this. It reinforces the change as opposed to driving you away from it.
Yeah. Take the risk, but don't take the reckless risk.
There's risk and there's fatal risk.
Yeah.
I tell everybody, like with money, this is one of my expressions when I'm working with people in coaching, like money, I like to cheat. I want to set it up where it's a situation where if everything goes right, I win. And if everything goes wrong, I don't lose.
That is really cool.
I may not win, but I at least don't lose. Right. And if I can do that, you do that every time. And guess what? You'll win some and you don't lose some. So you don't lose ground. And over time, guess what? If you have a few of the wins, you end up in the right place. You end up where you're trying to go.
Scott, I wanted to touch on something. So your book that released, I want to say it was July of 24.
Yes.
Inspired Living. What point in life would it benefit me? Or is it like, hey, regardless of where you're at, this is going to benefit me? Like what's in there and what kind of, aims and aspirations or desperations would be best to kind of line up to read the book?
So honestly, what we were just talking about, if you found yourself resonating with any of that, it's probably a good read for you. So the subtitle, it's Inspired Living, and the subtitle is Assembling the Puzzle of Your Call by Mastering Your Time, Your Talent, and Your Treasures. And so it is that kind of framework of let's look at these areas of your life. Let's break down what you're doing and maybe what you could be doing different. And through that, I then want to encourage people to I teach them some frameworks. So one of them is invest in yourself, invest in others, develop your influence, impact the world. The idea is, before we do anything to help others, we got to make sure we're in the right place.
Yes.
Then we turn that energy to help other people. And then from that naturally comes influence, and through that influence naturally comes impact. And so it's that kind of progression. There's other frameworks I teach in it. So it's really about breaking down, what you're doing, applying some new thinking, applying some new frameworks, and then through that, beginning to improve in those areas. So it's a lot of the exercises I use with my clients. It's a lot of the tools I use with my clients. I just decided to put it in a book form because, it turns out not everybody signs up for coaching and not everybody knows I exist. And it's just one more way of getting that message out in the world. So, honestly, if you're in the place where you know that those things are holding you back and you want to do something different, it's a good book for you. If you're convinced you already know all the answers, you're not going to get anything out of the book.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, man, when you talk about not everyone's ready for coaching, I honestly came in through the back door to coaching. That was one of those risks that I took. But the big hurdle was at that time, Scott, I didn't think I was worth investing in.
Yep.
Like that was the first domino that needed to be tipped over to then get me to go like, oh, I am worthwhile investing. And once that went, it was just like it fueled a fire that I did not know existed. And I wanted to invest in myself because I knew it paid me dividends. It paid my family dividends because as I'm in a better place, we're all in a better place, not just financially, but relationally. And then, you know, like you talked about as far as career and vocation, dude, everything changed from that point forward, Scott. So it's like, and I would just encourage guys, if you're in that place where it's like you're teachable, not like Scott said with the second part, man, if you think you know it all, you can't be helped.
Yeah, and by the way, coaching doesn't help you then either.
Yeah, exactly. Because you're not coachable.
Yeah, the irony is coaching is we usually aren't telling you something that you don't already know. Yeah. But the irony of coaching is what we're doing is changing the way you're looking at it. So all of a sudden you believe that you know it. It's a weird dichotomy, you know? Yeah. And yet at the end of the day, yeah, if you're convinced you already know all the answers and you already know what you need to know, well, you're not coachable. That's a different, you know, and that's fine. By the way, that's not a bad thing. It's just that coaching is not going to help you because that's not what you're looking for. You need something different.
Well, man, Scott, as we're wrapping up here, how can guys connect with you outside of this podcast?
Absolutely. So I put together a page just for your listeners. So if you go over to my website, which is inspiredstewardship.com, and then just put in /living fearless, then what you'll find there is a page that has some free resources that you could download. It has a way you could set up a call if you want to jump on a call with me. It has the information about my book and where you can pick that up, and my podcast and a few other resources on there. None of them except the book have any cost associated with them. You know, everything else is free on there. And I'd be honored to connect with anybody who is interested in having a conversation, or even if it's just, you know, pick my brain and need to get a little help. Nothing is, I'm not a real high pressure guy. Maybe I should be, but I'm not. So I just love meeting people and helping people and finding out what's going on. So again, you can find that at inspiredstewardship.com /living fearless.
I appreciate it, Scott. And I will have all that in the show notes as well. Make it easier because I know if guys are like me, man, you're driving down the road. It's like, wait a minute, what? I've got the grocery list and all these to-do things floating in my head. It's in the show notes. So just go there and the connection will be there. Scott, I appreciate your time and thank you for sharing that. It's like, dude, we're not stuck with who we are, nor is the situation that we're in, you know, that fatal kind of final situation that we're believing it. We just need to reach out, ask for help. And I think from both you and I, we can also give the advice. If you're married and you're hiding the situation from your wife,
you're not.
She already knows. Yeah, just go to her, talk to her, get somebody on your side there to help you. So, absolutely. Scott, thank you again, my friend. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Absolutely.